Monday Night Raw this week featured returns, departures, and a Viper on the prowl. This video will feature exclusive updates on Aleister Black, Dominik Mysterio, and Kairi Sane's next steps. Please take a moment to click like and subscribe, and I will jump straight in. Monday Night Raw started with Randy Orton declaring that he wanted a WWE Championship match with the current champion Drew McIntyre. There's no mince words and no hyperbole, he goes straight into it. This is a match I think we're all very excited to see at this year's event. While there's been news recently about Daniel Bryan and Edge writing a lot of their own stuff, I don't think enough credit is being given to Randy Orton, who is given the vaguest set of instructions before he goes out and makes magic happen with his promos. He's really hit his peak, as we all know, but I do have to say credit must be given to Randy himself with everything he's writing at the moment. As Randy Orton leaves the ring and goes up the ramp, even though it's not really much of a ramp, he is passed en route by Nia Jax, and they have a wonderful moment of staring at each other, which reminds me of the Royal Rumble when Nia Jax entered and took R-Truth's place, and you thought, oh wait, no, they can't get her out now, no man's going to hit her, oh Randy's there. Oh, Randy going to hit her. And he did. And in fact so did Ziggler and Rey Mysterio, so a lot of people would. Good throwback. Nia Jax declares that she is coming for the Women's Championship. There is a match later in the night between Sasha Banks and Asuka to determine who the Women's Champion is. Nia Jax is interrupted, you're going to hear the word interrupt again a lot, by Shayna Baszler, who comes down, picks a fight, and essentially gets no-sold. I mean, they have a scrap, but Nia Jax does all the hitting, and Shayna Baszler's offense is just ignored. We come back from the break and they're just out the ring now. The Street Profits are in the ring, declaring that we are having a triple threat tag team match to determine the #1 contender for their Raw Tag Team Championships. The three teams competing are essentially the entire rest of the Raw Tag Team division, that being Andrade and Garza, the Viking Raiders, and Ricochet and Cedric Alexander, who've at least got a little more prominence than usual this week. The eventual winners, in a move that I don't really feel surprise anyone, were Andrade and Garza, who will get the Tag Team Championship shot at SummerSlam. Personally, I can see them winning this. I think that's the logical next step, and then they can go into a feud with Cedric and Ricochet. The Street Profits were also on commentary for this match, and I've got to say, even though they occasionally overwhelmed the people actually commentating, and I don't want to hear less of Samoa Joe no matter what happens, I do feel they added a lot, particularly in tension. There is a moment when Ivar came off the top into a load of bodies, and you saw both Street Profits stand up in concern. Good acting, that. The next match is a return of Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler, which for me is a very exciting concept. Every time the ring announcer says this match is scheduled for one fall, I die a little inside, knowing that the crowd isn't there to shout it back. Maybe that's just a British thing. We do it in NXT UK all the time. Just as I'm getting excited for the match, it doesn't happen. Instead, as I mentioned earlier, Shayna Baszler throws some offense, Nia Jax ignores it, throws some back, and then they both beat up unrelated people. I get it. I mean, if they're moving into a no DQ situation or some sort of hardcore match, I'm excited. Both women have upside, as it were, and I think they will work very well together. Shayna Baszler can throw Nia Jax around for days, and Nia Jax, being the powerhouse that she is always going to look threatening. Unfortunately, this makes it seem unlikely that they're going to be involved in any sort of SummerSlam match. This seems more like a feud designed to just tide us over on Raw. I'm not sure it's going to bring in the ratings, and at the moment, everything the WWE are doing are with a view to bring in the ratings. They might end up rushing Charlotte Flair back. There are two backstage segments in quick succession. Firstly, Seth Rollins has to convince Buddy Murphy once again that they are following the right path. To my knowledge, Buddy Murphy is essentially a backup storyline should Rey Mysterio not sign a new contract. They can always trigger Seth versus Buddy, which is sort of the end goal of this whole situation that they're in. Secondly, we have Mark Henry talking with Ruby Riott and Bianca Belair. This would be Ruby and Bianca's only appearance because Liv Morgan, Billie Kay, currently unavailable. I'm glad they found a way to get them on the show. Of course, if you believe all the rumours about a new nation forming, that new nation now includes Ruby Riott and Bianca Belair. For defo, y'all. Back in the ring, Seth Rollins invites down Dominik Mysterio to come and talk. He does talk. He explains to Dominik that Dominik is welcome by his side and that the attack on his father had to be done. Dominik listens and then attacks Seth in what I felt was a very good showing. Now immediately Buddy Murphy gets involved, then Seth Rollins gets back involved himself. Dominik takes a firm beatdown and sells it extremely well. He is saved by Aleister Black, who is already injured in the arm or hand area, and that injury does not exactly improve when that is targeted once again. It looks like Aleister Black is going to be out for a brief period of time at least. Dominik Mysterio saves him from further punishment after, unfortunately for him, Buddy Murphy pushes Black's eye into the ring steps. Dominik, unfortunately, slightly too late. Dominik, however, has a kendo stick. He wails on Seth and Buddy Murphy, and also does that really good thing that you see when someone's lied down and the kendo stick doesn't actually touch them, it just touches the mat next to them, but still makes a wonderful sound and looks great. This guy's got talent. As regards news here, it does look like Aleister Black's going to be written off for a little while, potentially to spend some time with his family. Meanwhile, Dominik Mysterio is being geared towards stepping in the ring. Finally. Almost a year back on Sportskeeda, I reported about Dominik Mysterio not going through NXT and instead going straight to the main roster, and I've been keeping up to date ever since. I'll be doing a in-depth analysis video on that at some point soon, but I also mentioned it in the Sportskeeda podcasts. MVP invites Mustafa Ali down to the MVP VIP lounge to come and consider a job offer. It does seem like MVP is trying to hire everyone in the goddamn world at the moment. Mustafa Ali naturally does not accept. He goes into a matchup with Bobby Lashley. My expectation was that it'd be in a match with Shelton Benjamin, but from what I've learned since, I can see why they haven't done that. Mustafa Ali essentially is there to fill in the space left behind by Apollo Crews. They are expecting that when they actually get to film another segment of Raw, they will have Apollo Crews back, so we may not see Ali again for a little while, or they may find something else for him to do. For example, the 24/7 title scene, feuding with Shelton Benjamin. The match is good, as you might expect. Ali does get some offense in, Lashley does sell extremely well, but he also throws Ali around, as you might expect for two men of this relative size and experience. Lashley does win, Ali does tap out to the full Nelson, but a good showing nonetheless. Hopefully we see Ali competing again next week. Straddling the second and third hour, we get a long recap section. One of many long recap sections we've had, including one on the unsanctioned match between Randy Orton and the Big Show before the actual first segment. Of course, Big Show not on TV this time, despite it being filmed on the same day as last week. To sell what happened there, we're unlikely to see Big Show for a while. But we get a long recap package about the next match, which is Sasha Banks against Asuka. Now, there is no champion's advantage in this match per the ruling of Stephanie McMahon, which makes things very difficult. Now, it's an extremely good match. There are teasers of countouts, because countouts is one of the ways you can win this match and win the title. However, despite it going for a long time, and I feel we got a very impressive match here, one I could watch again and again and again, it does not come to a clean finish. The production truck puts on the big screen a video of Bayley beating up Kairi Sane. No officials come to help. Nothing is done to actually stop this from happening. Instead, Asuka is forced to leave the match, abandon her championship, and go and help Kairi Sane. Sasha Banks is your new Raw Women's Champion. Also, unfortunately, Kairi Sane is leaving the company, or at least stopping wrestling. The WWE have offered her a quite lucrative contract that prevents her from working anywhere else and holds her in place to work for an NXT Japan when it does launch. Of course, as I've mentioned in previous videos, if not for the current pandemic situation we are living in, NXT Japan would already have launched. I have very mixed feelings about this outcome. Now, on one hand, regardless of whether Asuka or Sasha won, I feel the Raw Women's Championship is in good hands. However, this does seem like they're just extending the feud even further, and the plan, even as far back as Extreme Rules, was to have Asuka win clean. To date, Asuka has won 0 matches clean as Raw Women's Champion. Now, you could argue her match against Charlotte Flair was clean, however Charlotte Flair was attacked and injured earlier in that night by Nia Jax. I also feel that Stephanie McMahon owes Asuka a major apology, because she completely removed championship advantage for no reason that I can tell. There are plenty of other times when this situation or something like it has happened and the champion's advantage remains. Asuka should be going for revenge against Stephanie McMahon. One good match follows another, with Buddy Murphy taking on Humberto Carrillo in the next segment. This was a very high tempo affair. They had quite a short amount of time to make a great match, and make a great match they did. I really enjoyed this. It was, like I say, very high tempo, with a great variety and range of moves, mostly in ring as well. This was without Seth Rollins or Aleister Black being involved, so it was two men competing in a singles fashion. A clean win for Buddy Murphy, as he's built up towards, as I mentioned, potentially challenging Seth Rollins after a breakaway. Our main event for the evening was Dolph Ziggler versus Drew McIntyre in Extreme Rules or no DQ fashion. Once again, they only had about 15 minutes to put on a great match, and put on a great match they did. There was a lot of use of chairs, there was use of a table, and there was plenty of use of the perspex around ringside, which when they first set that up, I was waiting for someone to use it first, and then everyone started using it. Dolph Ziggler sells like crazy, as we know he can. The win comes to Drew McIntyre, who claymores Ziggler through a table. It's a good look for everyone. After the match, as Drew McIntyre stands tall with his WWE Championship, he takes the RKO from Randy Orton, and this is the first time all year that Drew McIntyre has been made to look this vulnerable. My personal belief is that Drew McIntyre will be retaining at SummerSlam, and that this feud will probably continue until Survivor Series. Raw this week featured very good wrestling, and the segments were spaced out quite evenly. There was some good use of backstage for people who weren't on the show, at least in a wrestling capacity, and we had some matches that we don't normally get, for example Murphy versus Carrillo. And even though it wasn't a match, Jax versus Baszler, we saw some new faces, or at least some different faces, and that added an element of variety. We also got teased a little bit, so I'm a little bit disappointed in some regards, but the overall action was very satisfying. Storylines did advance, even if they were in directions that at first might seem confusing. So I do think this was a good Raw. That said, there was a lot of long recap packages and some booking that confused me, to say the least. My Twitter poll for this week's Raw had a 41% good rating, followed by a 26% great rating. I put this at good as well. I would not put it at great, as I feel it was bogged down in certain sections. However, it did travel a lot faster than it normally does for me. There are times when I sit there and I'm constantly looking at the clock because it just feels like it's dragging. This show didn't do that, and a lot of that was down to long, engaging matches, and things such as Kairi Sane saying on Twitter that essentially she's now done. There was always something interesting going on, and even though we missed some names, for example Kevin Owens wasn't on the show, I do feel that variety does work out. Let me know what you thought of this week's Raw down in the comments. I've been Tom Collihew, thank you for joining me.